Story Chapter 18 The Love Story of Camaralzaman, the Island Prince of Khaledan's Children and the Chinese Princess, Baddure. Your Majesty, about 20 days sailing from the Persian coast, offshore there is an island called the Island of Khaledan's Children. This island consists of many large provinces, all of which are prosperous because they have crowded and prosperous cities, forming a powerful kingdom. In the past, the ruler of this island was King Camaralzaman, who had 4 wives, all of whom were the king's princesses, and 60 concubines. Camaralzaman considered himself the happiest monarch on earth with the peace and prosperity of his reign. The only thing that made his happiness incomplete was that he was old and had no children to continue the family line even though he had many wives. He did not know where to blame his infertility, and in that sadness, he considered it a great misfortune if once he died there was no one in his bloodline to succeed the throne. For a long time he hid the pain that tormented him. The more sad he was, the more he tried to keep it a secret and not reveal it to anyone. Finally, unable to stay silent anymore, one day he confided in the Prime Minister, and after bitterly lamenting his fate, he asked the Prime Minister if there was any solution to save the situation. That wise minister said, "If what your Majesty asks depends on the common laws of human experience, you will be satisfied immediately. But let me confess that my experience and knowledge I am not enough to satisfy your Majesty's demands. Only God can help. Living amidst wealth, gold, and silk, we often forget Him, so He sometimes causes us sadness here and there so that we have to think about and acknowledge His supreme power, seeing that the things we wish for only remain. Only look to Him. Your Majesty has subjects who specialize in worshipping God, serving Him and living ascetic lives because they believe and love Him. My opinion is that your Majesty should contribute to the merit and encourage them to pray together with your Majesty. Maybe in that crowd of monks, there was someone who was quite pure and favored by God, so his request was accepted by him to meet your Majesty's wishes." King Camaralzaman appreciated that advice and wholeheartedly thanked his Prime Minister. He ordered a lot of wealth to be donated to the communities of monks, organized a big party and told them his wishes so that they could inform all the monks under his authority. Camaralzaman soon got his wish. One of his wives became pregnant and after 9 months gave birth to a son. To give thanks, he sent many valuable offerings to the mosques and at the same time celebrated his birthday not only in the capital but everywhere within the kingdom. The fun lasted for a week. The prince was brought to him at birth. He found the child so beautiful that he named him Camaralzaman, the moon of the century. Prince Camaralzaman was brought up very well. As soon as he was old enough to go to school, his father appointed a virtuous eunuch and many good teachers to take care of him and teach him well. These famous teachers saw that he was intelligent, clever, docile and capable of absorbing all the knowledge taught not only about ethics and customs but also all the things that a king needs to know. Death. A little older, he learned martial arts quickly with a great mastery that made everyone admire, especially the emperor, his father. When the prince was just 15 years old, the emperor had a very loving love for his son, and that love was always expressed in every way. He wanted to express it in a very special and glorious way by abdicating the throne to give him the throne. He discussed that idea with the Prime Minister and added, "I am afraid that my son will lose, in leisure, his God-given talent as well as the success he has gained in studying and training." Because I have reached the age to think about retirement, I decided to cede the throne to the prince and retire to live out the rest of my days with the satisfaction of seeing my son rule the country. I need to rest after many years of hardship in power." The Prime Minister did not want to give out all the reasons to persuade him not to make the decision to cede the throne. On the contrary, he wanted to go deeper into the emotional aspect. "Your Majesty, the prince is still too young to take on such a responsibility. The burden is to rule a powerful nation. Your Majesty is afraid that he may be spoiled by an idle life for many reasons, but as a precaution, why don't you consider getting him married early? Marriage will bind and prevent falling into a life of debauchery." In addition to getting married, His Majesty allowed him to attend council meetings so that he could gradually become familiar with the work of the royal court, and then when he saw that he was fully capable according to His Majesty's own experience, that was it. Was when His Majesty passed the throne to him. Camaralzaman found the advice of the first Prime Minister extremely reasonable, so when he retired, the king called Prince Camaralzaman. The prince often visited his father at predetermined times and rarely had to come. So this time he was surprised to hear his father's call. Instead of feeling comfortable as usual, this time he greeted his father formally and bowed in front of him. The emperor noticed the prince's restraint and gently told him, "Do you know why I asked you to come here?" "Your Majesty," he humbly replied, "only God understands everything. I am very pleased to know your thoughts. I called you here," said the emperor, "to tell you that I want to marry you. What do you think?" Prince Camaralzaman was very unhappy when he heard his father say that. He was so shocked that he was sweating and didn't know how to answer. After a moment of silence, he said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me for being silent when I heard your declaration. I don't expect that because I'm too young. I also don't know if I have ever been bound by marriage because women not only cause a lot of trouble, which I understand very well, they are also cunning, cruel and deceitful people like in many of my books. The authors I have read. Maybe my opinion is not that fixed, but I feel that I need some time before I can decisively do what the king asks." Scheherazade wanted to continue talking but saw the undue, realized it was already morning and got out of bed, so she stopped. The next night, she continued telling this story. Oh, Your Majesty, the prince's words made his father extremely sad. This king was truly heartbroken to see that he had such a terrible dislike for marriage. However, he did not want to accuse him of disobedience, nor did he want to use his paternal authority over him. He only gently told me, "I don't want to force you. Let me give you time to think and see that a prince like you was born to rule a great country. You must first think about needing an heir. Giving yourself that joy, you will also make me happy because I see myself alive again in you and in the grandchildren you give birth to." Camaralzaman said nothing more to Prince Camaralzaman. He let him participate in secret national meetings and tried every way to please him. A year later, he called him aside and said, "How is it, my son? Do you remember thinking about my wishes about getting married that I told you about last year? Will you still refuse me the satisfaction of your obedience, and let me die without knowing that joy?" The prince seemed less surprised than the first time and did not hesitate for long and answered decisively as follows. "Father, I will not forget that matter, but after careful consideration I am even more determined that I will live alone. Don't let marriage tie you down." Truly, The immeasurable sufferings caused by women in all ages on earth, which you know clearly from history books and what you hear every day about their devilish deeds, are the reasons because it made me determined to live my whole life without having anything to do with them. So, Father, please forgive me if I dare to ask you to not mention anything about marriage from now on." He stopped here and abruptly left his father the emperor without waiting for him to say anything else. All the other kings must have found it difficult to contain their anger after the prince's bold words above and would not forget to make him regret it. But King Schahzaman loved his son very much and wanted to use gentle words before forcing him. He informed the Prime Minister of his new sadness caused by Prince Camaralzaman. "I followed your advice," he told the Prime Minister, but Camaralzaman was even more estranged from marriage than before, and the prince, he even presented it to me with words so bold that I had to exercise great restraint not to get angry. Fathers who are as devoted as I am to the prince are truly people who suddenly deprive themselves of peace and rest. What do you think I should do now to make that stubborn guy obey my will?" "Your Majesty," said the Prime Minister with patience, "people achieve countless successes in their work. It may be that this matter is not of a nature that can succeed along that path. There is nothing to blame that His Majesty somewhat wanted to hasten things. Please consider whether you can give the prince another year to think. If during this time, the prince knows his duty, the king's joy will be greater than using his father's power to force him. If, on the contrary, he still persists in refusing, then, when a year has passed, His Majesty will declare before the whole court that for the good of the country, the prince must marry." It's unbelievable that in front of a famous group where His Majesty is respected by his presence, the prince would show such disrespect. The emperor, extremely eager to see his prince and son get married quickly, each day seemed to him as long as a year, let alone having to postpone the deadline for another year. He felt extremely impatient. But I had to follow the Prime Minister's very convincing and irrefutable advice. Daylight had begun to shine, forcing Scheherazade to stop speaking at this point. She continued the story the next night and said to Emperor Shahryar, "Oh, Your Majesty," after the Prime Minister had left, Emperor Schahzaman went to the residence of Prince Camaralzaman's mother, whom he had discussed many times with. She married her son. He sadly told her how his stubborn refusal for the second time hurt him, but he still had to be generous to him because of the Prime Minister's advice. How, he told her, I know that her child trusts you more than me. She said it was easier for him to obey. So please take some time to seriously and intimately tell him that if he continues to be stubborn like that, he will have to be stubborn even though he really doesn't want to, and he will regret not obeying his father. Fatima, that was the name of Camaralzaman's mother, met her son, the prince, for the first time, and told him that she had heard that his refusal to marry the emperor made her very afraid. The emperor was extremely angry. Mother Camaralzaman said, "Please do not arouse my pain about that anymore. I'm very scared, because I'm in a bored mood and maybe I'll do something rude to Mom, which would be a pity. Fatima, through your words, I know that the wound is still too fresh, so this time I won't say anything more." Some time later, Fatima found an opportunity to talk to him about the same issue, hoping he would listen. "My son?" she said, "I beg you, please tell me, if this does not cause you trouble. For what reasons do you hate marriage? If you just say that women are cunning, cruel and have nothing else but those bad qualities, then the reason is very weak and not even reasonable. I don't want to defend evil women. There are many people like that, I admit. But it's unfair to generalize because not all women are evil. In the books I read, I saw that certain people had indeed caused great chaos, and I myself did not want to forgive them. But why don't you pay attention to how many kings, emperors and other princes there are whose arbitrariness, brutality and cruelty make everyone terrified and disgusted? They have been mentioned in the history books that you and I have read. If compared, for every woman there must be 1,000 brutal men. And good, honest women are unfortunate enough to have to be paired with those crazy people. Do you think they are very happy? Mother, said Camaralzaman, I have no doubt that there are many women who are wise, virtuous, kind, gentle, and honest. May God make them all like your mother? What makes me unhappy is that a man is forced to make a choice about who he wants to marry without any guarantees, or in other words, he is not free to do as he wishes. Suppose I decide to enter into marriage like my father has been eagerly hoping for, then what kind of wife will he give me? It must be the princess that my father intended for me, the daughter of a king of a neighboring country, and that king must have been honored to have his daughter become my daughter-in-law. Whether it's beautiful or ugly, you have to take it. I want my wife to be beautiful, no other princess can compare to her, but can anyone guarantee that she will be pleasant, lovely, affable, and courteous in terms of intelligence and personality? When it comes to talking, and talking, do you know how to say proper, tactful conversations, or are they all about clothes, fancy dress, adornment, jewelry, and 1,000 other nonsense things that make any man stand up? Everyone has to have pity. In short, is there anyone who can guarantee that I will marry a girl who is not arrogant, bossy, snobby and disrespectful, and will not make a country bankrupt because of her reckless spending on clothes and pearls, about jewelry and other crazy and out-of-place frivolities? As you can see, Mom, that one item alone has countless weaknesses that make me completely hate marriage. No matter how perfect and complete that princess is, with nothing to blame, you still have countless stronger reasons to maintain your thoughts and decisions. Star? My child Fatima said, do you have other reasons besides the ones you just said? I see that with just one word, I can make you lose your reason. Please keep talking, Mother the prince stubbornly. Maybe I can refute that opinion of yours. My son, I want to say, Fatima said, for a prince, if he has the misfortune of marrying a princess like you just described, there is no difficulty in abolishing her and issuing a decree prohibiting her. To avoid making the country bankrupt. Oh. Mother said, Prince Camaralzaman, don't you see how humiliating it is for a prince to be forced to go to that extreme? For your own glory and peace, don't get involved in that, wouldn't that be better? But my child? Fatima said again, the way you think, I see that you want to be the last king of the family that once ruled in glory and glory in the island kingdom of the children of Khaledan. Mother Prince Camaralzaman replied, I do not wish to live longer than my father the king. If unfortunately the child died before him, it would not be surprising because it is not uncommon for a child to die before his father. But there is always honor for an entire dynasty if the last king of that generation proves worthy, and you are trying your best to be worthy of the predecessors and founders of the dynasty. Banned. From that day on, Queen Fatima had many such conversations with Prince Camaralzaman and tried to find out his weakness to root out his hatred for marriage. But every time he refuted her argument with other reasons, she didn't know how to respond. He remained as inert as a rock, solid as copper, unshakable. Another year has passed. In Emperor Shahzaman's sadness, Prince Camaralzaman has not shown any signs of changing his opinion. One day, at a solemn court meeting attended by a large number of prime ministers, ministers and generals, the emperor told the prince, "I have long made you aware of my earnest wishes is to see your child become a family and wait with the kindness of a father asking for nothing more reasonable. You have resisted so many times that I can no longer be patient. Before the court, today we raised this issue again. It is no longer to obey a father's will that I do not dare to refuse, but this is because the interests of the country are required and all the great ministers here request it along with you. So what will you say? I still have to decide accordingly." Prince Camaralzaman responded with a rather flippant attitude, or in other words with an annoyed attitude that humiliated the emperor in front of the whole court, who could not hold back his righteous anger. "What? That lost child? You dare to speak so insolently before your father the emperor?" He immediately ordered the guards to arrest him and put him in a long-abandoned ancient tower. He was imprisoned in there with a bed, a few tables and chairs, some books and only one servant. Camaralzaman, pleased to be free to converse with his books, looked at the cell with cold eyes. In the afternoon, he bathed, prayed, and after reading a few chapters of the Quran as calmly as if he were in his private residence in his father's emperor's harem, he lay down to sleep, the lamp still burning. Light next to the bed. In that ancient tower there was a well, the daytime refuge of a nymph named Maimun, daughter of Damriat, who was king or leader of a group of gods. At that time, around midnight, the fairy Maimun gently jumped out of the well and went to visit the world to satisfy her curiosity. The fairy was very surprised to see the fire in Prince Camaralzaman's chamber. She walked past the servant sleeping next to the door to go inside, approaching the bed whose splendor caught her attention. She was even more surprised when she saw someone sleeping on it. Half of Prince Camaralzaman's face was covered by a corner of the blanket. The fairy lifted it up a little and was stunned to see a beautiful young man never before seen anywhere on earth that she had passed through. "Oh, how brilliant!" she thought to herself, or to put it another way, if those eyes were opened again, how dazzling would their beauty be. But why, being in a high position, was he treated like that? Because the fairy also knew about his situation but not in detail. Maimun watched Prince Camaralzaman without getting tired of her eyes. After kissing him on both cheeks and the middle of his forehead without waking him up, she soared into the air. She was flying high in the sky when she suddenly heard the sound of flapping wings, so she quickly flew in that direction. When she got closer, she saw that the sound of flapping wings was caused by a god, one of the gods who opposed God. The god named Danhash, son of Shamhaurash, was terrified when he recognized Maimun, because he knew that her bravery was much greater than his. He wanted to avoid this encounter, but because it was too close, he had no choice but to either fight or surrender. Danhash quickly suggested in a humble voice, "The mighty Maimun, in the name of God, swear that you will do me no harm." "On my part, I swear the same." "Evil spirit?" Maimun said, "What harm can you do to me? I am not afraid of you, but I also accept your request. Tell me, where have you been, what have you seen and what have you done tonight?" "Beautiful fairy," said Donhash, "you met me just in time to hear something wonderful I will tell you." Queen Scheherazade was forced to stop speaking because the light of day was slowly shining. The next night, she continued as follows. "Oh, your Majesty," she said, "the god who opposed God continued to speak to my moon. Since you want to hear, let me tell you that I have just come from here. The tip of China, the place overlooking the last islands of this hemisphere, here. But do you promise to let me go wherever I want after I tell you?" Tell me. "Don't be afraid of anything," my moon said. "Do you think I am a fraud like you, breaking my promise to you? Just remember not to tell the truth. If you lie, I will punish you accordingly." Danhash felt somewhat reassured when he heard that and said, "Dear fairy, I will tell you all the truth. Please listen. The country of China, where I just left, is one of the largest and most powerful nation on earth, upon which the last islands of this hemisphere depend. The current king is Gayer, and this king has only one daughter who has never had anyone as beautiful as since the beginning of time. Neither she, nor I, nor all the gods and fairies beside her as well as me, nor all the people gathered together could find the words, the sentences, the words. Speak appropriately, vividly and with enough eloquent elements to portray a portrait similar to her true self. Her hair is brown. And long, reaching to her heels. Her forehead was as flat as a mirror with a beautiful shape, her black eyes sparkled with fire, her nose was not too long and not too short, her mouth was small and fresh like lipstick, her teeth were like 2 rows of white pearls. When she moved her tongue to speak, her soft and gentle voice emitted words full of intelligence. The whiteness of the jade stone is even worse than her jade-white neck. A few simple features like that were enough for her to understand that in this world it is difficult to have such perfect beauty. The king's father loved her very much, and forbade her to let anyone freely come into contact with her, except the person who would later marry her. To keep her from being bored in such a forbidden palace, the king built 7 palaces that no one had ever seen or heard of. The first palace was made of crystal, the second was made of bronze, the third was made of fine steel, the fourth was made of a strange kind of bronze that was more precious than both copper and steel, the fifth was made of stone that proved to be gold, the sixth was made of silver and Saturday in solid gold. The palaces are all decorated with splendid furniture suitable to the construction materials of each palace. The king did not forget that the gardens accompanying each palace had smooth lawns or speckled with flowers, puddles, fountains, ditches, waterfalls, and groves of trees stretching far into the distance. Sunlight has a hard time getting through. They all have a different order in each garden. King Gayer, in short, showed everyone that it was only fatherly love that made him make such a huge expense. Hearing rumors about the princess's beauty, many neighboring kings sent solemn envoys to ask for friendship. The King of China welcomed them equally because he only wanted to marry the princess to whomever she chose. And she rejected all the suitors who came to propose. The envoys left less than satisfied with the desired result, but there was nothing to complain about the solemn reception and many honors received by the Chinese king. "Dear father," the princess said to the king, "you want me to get married and think it will make me happy. I clearly see my father's heart and am extremely grateful to him. But besides being near my father, near the glorious palaces, near the wonderful gardens, where can I find happiness now? I would like to add that being loved by you, I am not forced into anything but also enjoy the same honors as my father. Those are advantages that you cannot get anywhere in this world, from any husband with whom you agree. Husbands always want to be the boss, but children don't want anyone to oppress them. After many embassies had to return empty-handed, a group came from a very rich and powerful kingdom, richer and stronger than all the groups that had come so far. The King of China discussed with the princess, his daughter, and analyzed all the benefits if the princess agreed with this group. The princess asked her father to excuse her and brought up the previous reasons again. He tried to force her, but not only did she not agree, but she also showed disrespect towards her father. "Dear father," she said angrily, "please don't tell me about this group or all the others. If not, I will stab myself in the heart with a knife to free myself from disturbances." The Chinese king was extremely angry and told the princess, "You are a crazy person and I will treat you like a crazy person." The king ordered her to be imprisoned in one of the 7 palaces and gave her only 10 old slaves to serve and be her companion day and night. Among these 10 people, one is her nanny. Then, so that the neighboring kings who had sent envoys to propose marriage would no longer think of her, he sent special envoys to inform them of the princess's avoidance of marriage. And because he believed that she was really crazy, he also announced to the countries that if there was a good doctor who could cure the princess, he would invite them to come and marry the princess to repay their gratitude if she recovered. Beautiful Maimun. Danhash continued, "Things are in that state right now, and I don't forget to come every day to see this unparalleled beauty. Even though I have a mischievous personality, I would never do anything to hurt her. Please come and take a look, I guarantee it won't be a waste of time." When she sees clearly that I am not a liar, she will thank me for letting her see that the princess is truly a peerless beauty. I am willing to be a guide to serve. Please give me orders. Instead of responding to Danhash, Maimun burst out laughing for a long time and Danhash was dumbfounded and didn't understand why. After laughing to her heart's content, she said, "Pretty good?" "Pretty good?" She said she was evil. "You want to make me believe that? I thought you were going to tell me something strange, but instead you told me about a certain wide-eyed girl? Ha, ha. What would you say, my God, if you saw like me the handsome prince I just visited today, and I really want him to be worthy of it? That's a completely different story. You'll go crazy." Miss Maimunul Danhash said. Would it be too bold to ask her to tell me who the prince she talked about was? You should know Maimun told him the story is similar to the story of the princess you just told me. Your father the king wants to force you to get married. After being bothered many times, he bluntly and unequivocally declared that he would not get married. That is why, when I am talking to you right now, he is imprisoned in an ancient tower that is also my residence and I have just admired him there. I absolutely do not want to contradict you, said Danhash, but please allow me to look at your prince, to see clearly that no one living or dead can compare with him. My beautiful princess. Just shut up, damn you. Maimun retorted, I tell you again that this is impossible. I don't want to try to argue with you. Danhash still refused. If you want to know if I'm right or wrong, the only way is for you to accept my proposal to come see my princess and then please show me your prince. There is no need for me to work so hard to do that, Maimun said again. There is another way for you and me to be satisfied. That is to bring your princess back to my prince's bed. So you and I can easily look and compare carefully and end the argument. Danhash was satisfied with the fairy's solution and wanted to immediately return to China. Maimoun stopped him. "Wait," she told him, "come here. First I want to show you the ancient tower to which you must bring the princess." Together they flew to the ancient tower. Maimoun showed him and told him, "Let's go, shall we? And bring the princess back here immediately. You will still see me here. But listen, at least you have to pay me a bet if my prince is more beautiful than your princess, and I have to pay you a bet if the princess is more beautiful than the prince." The sky was already bright. Scheherazade hesitated. She continued the story the next night and said to the Indian emperor, "Oh, Your Majesty, Danhash left the ferry behind and rushed to China and returned very quickly, unimaginably, taking the princess with him." The beautiful princess was sleeping soundly. Maimoun caught her, brought her into Prince Camaralzaman's bedroom and placed her on the bed next to him. When the prince and princess were lying side by side, an argument broke out between the fairy and the villain talked about who was more beautiful. They looked at each other and silently compared. Danhash broke the silence first. "You saw that he told the fairy just like I said, my princess is more beautiful. Must be your prince. Do you have any doubts now?" "What? Doubts?" Maimoun said. "No, I don't believe it yet. You must be blind to see that your princess is more beautiful than my prince. Your princess is also beautiful, I admit, but don't be hasty. Compare the two of you impartially. You will see exactly what I said." "The more you compare," Danhash said, "the more I see nothing different from what I thought. I saw the same thing as the first time I saw it, and no matter how long I looked, nothing changed. But it's okay, lovely Maimoun. I can give you the win, if you want." "That's impossible," Maimoun said. "I don't want a damn villain like you to give in to me. I will ask a referee to judge. If you refuse, it means you lose." Danhash, who was ready to do anything to please Maimoun, immediately agreed. Maimoun stomped his foot hard. The ground suddenly cracked and out came an ugly god, hunchbacked, one-eyed and missing a leg. He has 6 horns growing on his head and his hands and feet have long nails. As soon as he stood up straight, the ground closed up. He saw Maimoun and immediately knelt down in front of her and obediently asked her if she had anything to teach her. "Stand up, Cash." She said, "The god has that name. I called you up to judge my argument with this damned Danhash. Please take a look at that bed, and tell us without bias who you think is more beautiful, the boy or the girl." Cash looked at the prince and princess with surprise and admiration. After a while, he said, "Madam," he said to Maimoun, "I confess that I would deceive you and betray myself if I said that one person is more beautiful than the other. The more closely I look at them, the more I see that each person is different, no one is inferior to the other. This person doesn't have any small defects that tell him he has to give it up to the other person. If you want to know who is better and who is worse, in my opinion there is only one way to make it clear. Wake them up one by one and ask the two of you to agree on which of the two shows more passionate love. Being more hurried and with more passionate feelings is considered less beautiful in some way." Both men found Cash's advice acceptable. Maimoun immediately turned into a bug and jumped on Camaralzaman's neck, stinging him so much that he woke up and touched his neck, but Maimoun promptly jumped back and returned to his original form, of course still invisible like the two gods. Lin stood there to see what the prince did. When he withdrew his hand, the prince let his hand fall into the hand of the Chinese princess. He opened his eyes and was extremely surprised to see a girl lying next to him, a stunningly beautiful girl. He raised his head and propped himself up on his elbow to look closely. The princess's youthfulness and seductive beauty made his whole body heat up with a fire he had never felt before, which he had always hated. Love invaded his heart so strongly that he exclaimed, "Oh, how beautiful! Why so seductive? My heart! Piece of my soul!" While shouting like that, he bent down and kissed her forehead, cheeks and lips passionately. If Danhasch hadn't given her a deep sleep, she would definitely have woken her up. "How? My beautiful lady?" the prince said. "Did you not wake up in the face of Prince Camaralzaman's expressions of love? Whoever you are, I am not unworthy of you." He was about to try to wake the princess up but stopped and suddenly thought, "Are you the person my father the emperor wants me to marry? If so, then you were wrong. Why didn't you let me see her first? I have not been guilty of disrespecting you for openly opposing you, and you will not lose your dignity because of me." Prince Camaralzaman sincerely regretted the mistake he had made and wanted to wake the princess up again. It could also be that he stopped and thought to himself, "The emperor wants to catch me red-handed. He sent this beautiful princess here. I'm here to test whether I really hate marriage like I said. Who knows, maybe it was he who brought her here. Maybe he was hiding in a hidden place and making me feel ashamed of my false disguise that he thought. This mistake will be much worse than the first mistake. To prevent everything, let's be willing to temporarily hold this ring to remember her." It was a very beautiful ring. The princess wore it on her finger. He skillfully removed it and replaced it with his own ring. Finished, he lay down and turned his back, and soon fell asleep as before under the spell of the gods. Seeing that Prince Camaralzaman was fast asleep, Danhasch in turn also turned into a bug and crawled up and bit right under the princess's lips. She woke up startled, sat up, opened her eyes and was extremely surprised to see a guy lying next to her. From surprise to admiration, from admiration to joy when I saw that the person under my eyes was a very handsome, very lovely young man. Star? Is he the guy my father told me to marry? Oh! If only we knew in advance? I have not made you angry with me. I didn't have to suffer the disadvantage of how long it took to find a husband that I loved with all my heart. Please wake up. Let's wake up, shall we? Is it unbecoming of a husband to fall asleep like that in the middle of the first wedding night? Having finished speaking, the princess grabbed Prince Camaralzaman's arm and shook him vigorously. He would definitely have to wake up if at that moment, my moon did not increase the spell to make him sleep even more deeply. She shook him so many times, seeing that he was still not awake, she muttered, "What's wrong? Did something happen to him? Is there a rival lover who is jealous of our happiness and has to turn to magic for help? Otherwise, why shake so hard and still not wake up?" She took his hand and kissed it lovingly and suddenly saw the ring on his finger. "It looks like my ring, but why does my finger have a different ring?" She didn't understand how this exchange happened, but she thought it was a sign of marriage between her and him, without any doubt. Wanting to wake him up, but seeing that it was useless, and that he certainly couldn't get out of her hands, she told him, "Because there's no way to wake him up," she said. "I don't want to sleep either. Why does his sleep have to be interrupted? Well, we'll see each other later." Then, after placing a passionate kiss on his cheek, she lay down again and soon fell asleep again. When Maimun found she could speak without waking the Chinese princess, "Hey! That damn monster," she told Danhash, "have you seen it? Do you admit that your princess is not as great as my prince? Well, I'll forgive you for that bet. Next time, when I say something, believe it." Then returning to Kashkash, she said, "And you, I thank you very much. Together with Danhash, lift up the princess and bring her back to her bed. Danhash will guide you." Danhash and Kashkash obeyed her orders and Malmoon retreated back into the well. The morning light forced Queen Scheherazade to keep quiet. The Indian emperor stood up and the next night, the queen told him the story as follows. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.